So let's keep going then. It'll be quite, this all started, how did the webinar actually come about? To some extent, one of our colleagues, Emma, Nixon, who's in marketing, she'd been talking to some clients and they would seen lots of stuff on social media about energy and about diet and Joe Wicks and all those things. But she was saying, actually, you know, a lot of people seem to have lost their mojo. And I said, well, you know, I said, as I said last time, actually, I said, well, actually, there was a time where, what does that actually mean, have lost your mojo? And it gave me an opportunity to think about that. And I remember a time in business when I'd lost some confidence, and I spoke to a friend and said, I've lost the confidence. And he said, well, where'd you lose it? Did you lose it on a train, on a bus, in a car? And I thought he was there to try and help me. But actually, what he was trying to get to say is actually, you probably haven't lost it. You've just gone underground for a bit. And that's probably the same with one's mojo. And there's many reasons why, you know, we know why people are losing their mojo at the minute. It may be to do with feeling very isolated that we see on the news. Conference calls aren't really a substitute for real meetings. You can't have the hugs. You can't have the closeness. You can't see the whites of people's eyes. Not as well anyway, because you can see them on the face. We don't know what's going on under the table. And then another reason may be cancelled work, or it may be the fact that the work that you used to do is really exciting, but at the minute, all the creative stuff stopped and there's just some uninspiring bits. Also exhausting, adapting to work and home and all the other things that we're going to know in terms of the way in which we work and what's going on. In terms of, just move my screen, here we are. In terms of energy, and particularly in terms of finding our mojo, you know, I said before, and I think there's a sense of previously that, you know, you can plug a computer into a wall socket and it's ready to go. And humans, on the other hand, need to meet some core energy needs to be at their best. And part of what this webinar is about, and the whole series has been about, is actually to try and be in a situation where we can give you some energy, or you can actually help others in terms of giving them some energy and helping them focus on that. So in terms of the webinars, regaining your mojo, we recognise and acknowledge the fact that actually for many people, regaining your mojo actually also starts at the stage before your emotions. It starts at the physical level, and that's to do with, you know, one's diet, one's nutrition, one's amount of sleep they're getting, and also the amount of exercise and types of foods and etc. they've got. I am probably not the best advocate for that necessarily. I do try, but you'll hear some stories about it from me later on. But there are people who are skilled and experienced in that, and we see the Joe Wicks of the world and other nutritionists and people talking about the physical side of things. So I'll let them do that. We previously explored your emotions and how that can impact you in terms of your emotional energy and helping you feel good and feeling valued, which can inspire you to do things and achieve things. But at the same time, we're now going to focus on your mind and what that's all about in terms of energy in the situation that we're facing and learning to think clearly. And the final webinar is going to be on your spirit, and it's not from a religious point of view. It's your spirit or inner self in terms of actually, what are my core values? What are the behaviors that I display? Am I living true to my values, and am I authentic? And actually, given the world that we're facing in now, am I who I want to be? Am I doing what I want to be doing? And actually finding your purpose to some extent. So we're going to be looking at 3 areas: mental energy, our capacity to focus attention. We're going to look at underlying preferences and how that sort of drives or can drive our behavior and also impact us in terms of our energy. And then we're going to, in typical sort of work happy fashion, we're going to focus on doing one thing differently. You know, all too often people have too many things to do and just don't have the time to do them. And what we really want to do is to create an opportunity for an individual of any, say any ilk, that's the wrong word, from any part of the world or society, whether they be in work situation, whether they be in furlough situation, or whether they be retired or whatever, actually to just have the opportunity to do something differently that will help them. So I guess let's set a bit of context. And for me, I just want a bit of honesty. I would like you to think about or consider, you know, when did you last actually hear your email ping and went to look at it immediately, or that you started searching on Google, check your Twitter, Instagram, or your social media book on Facebook or YouTube, or get distracted or see the news feed relating to your stocks and shares going down at a great rate or something, or skim the news for headlines. How many windows do you have open on your computer at the minute? If you're listening to me, are there multiple things in the background going on? And my guess is that pretty recently, or even a few seconds ago, that for many, there's lots of distractions and lots of things going on. You know, we live in a world of constant distractions, and we tend to, for a lot of us, not all of us at the minute, have a lot on our plate with not enough time, not enough space or quietness to concentrate fully, and definitely in the world, information overload. And for a lot of people, really busy minds in terms of thoughts and thinking and what's going on. And if the normal world is characterized by distraction alone, was bad enough, in terms of our ability to pay attention over a sustained period, what's it actually like now for people? You know, I'm sure that some of you during COVID-19 are experiencing the above things that we talked about as a factor by 10, really. You know, you might be working from home, or you might be on furlough, or actually just wanting to get something done, specifically achieve something. But now you've got to take time to perhaps teach the children. Maybe you've got to get involved in the meals, check in on relatives. Oh, have a Zoom meeting. Oh, go on a webinar, have another Zoom meeting. Oh, and then Charlie comes in and says, Mum, can you have help with my maths? Or, you know, and that's in the makeshift office. And then the dog wants to be let out, or the postman rings, and you've got to open the doorbell. And then at the end of the day, you're going to relax again by socializing on Zoom virtually. Ultimately, all of the above can drain us of energy. It does drain us of energy. If you've been on Zooms multiple days, I was talking to somebody who's gone back-to-back Zooms, and it just starts to become ineffective. I mean, the intention is there. It's a good intention for everybody, but I think we're just learning how to maximize it and use it to our best capability. Ultimately, all those things, those distractions drain us of our energy, but not only physically and emotionally, but also mentally. And actually being totally overwhelmed by life at one end of the spectrum to being totally bored at the other end with nothing to focus on, nothing to light our fire, actually, interestingly enough, can also sap your mental energy. You can find yourself being distracted, for example, by everything and anything, and lost in a video game for hours. And sometimes you use that as a way to hide away from the reality of the world and what's going on. And when was the time that you really took some time to stand back out your day and just think creatively or long term without any interruptions? And it's interesting for me because there are some people who the minds are busy and they just can't focus and they've got no attention, and they just, you know, it's just really tough for them. And for others, I've been talking to some friends who during the lockdowns actually said it's been a chance for them to step off the mouse wheel. You know, a forced situation has forced him to be furloughed and focus on something else at home at the moment, and to paint and tap into a creative side. And for the first time in 15 years, he was saying, you know what, I've got a chance to refresh. And I haven't had that. I've been on the go for years, it seems like. And we always have this idea of wanting to do things and get a job done. And then suddenly we get interrupted or distracted. And then we get interrupted or distracted again. And then we're going to go upstairs and then do something, and then we get interrupted again. And it's a bit like the credit card when we first have that. We're just going to buy something, and then we're going to buy something else. And then we're going to buy something else. And before we know it, we don't know how much we've spent in terms of money. Well, this is the equivalent in terms of time, because, oh, I'm going to get back to that. Oh, I'll get back to that. Oh, I'll get back to that. And actually, when are we going to get back to that? Because actually that's just built up in time and you've lost it. And for me, one of the whole things about the situation, and particularly the world of work and perhaps COVID-19 as well, but in many cases, we've lost something. We've lost the poverty of attention. To some extent, I think it's been hijacked, or we've let it be. But the important thing is actually, how do we learn to get our attention back? What is it going to take? And what if we don't actually manage to do that? Humans and are creatures of habit. 95% of our behavior occurs out of habit, or either unconsciously or in reaction to external demands. And sometimes we actually start thinking about something, it gets difficult to do. So, for example, if you try breathing, you'll likely lose your breathing rhythm if you try and think about it consciously. But we do it naturally. We almost, have this unconscious competent sometimes where we do things without thinking about them. That's called in the flow. And that enables us to be automatic, to have some sense of fluidity, some sense of speed for things to happen. And I'm using sport as an analogy in a sense, but it can be anything. You know, in sport, individuals react to a moving ball. Doesn't have time to think, just does it. The only focus is the one thing. And this picture shows the guy. You can see his eyes, you can see his physiology. He's just, the target is the ball and he's focused on that and he's getting prepared for it. But actually, anything else at that moment is a distraction. And I've done some work in the past, and I've got a number of friends who are professional golfers, and I've been helping them on the tour on the mental side of the game and those sorts of things, and even friends and amateurs, and also for myself at times. But it's interesting to me that, for example, in the game of golf, the ball, the target is standing still, and you have to initiate the action to the ball. And to hit a ball only takes, I don't know, 10, 15, 20 seconds, and you don't have any time. But so many golfers standing over a ball start thinking about not what they've got to do, which is just hit the ball. Actually, they just think about, how am I going to hit it? And they start thinking about the sequence. They start thinking about their left leg, their right head, their right elbow, their left arm, the pronation, the supination, whatever it is, the movement to get there. And if you're sitting at home in front of the telly and you've just eaten an apple and you see your bin in the corner and you give it a little lob into the bin, you don't sit and think about how you're going to do it. You look at the target, you see it, and you do it. And you get it there or just miss it. But thinking can often get in the way sometimes. So actually, being relaxed sometimes can help us, and having a focus can help us. And focus is one way, and something that I'll come back to, but there is something else in terms of things that we need to do. So why, for example, do 25% of people give up on a New Year's resolution after 1 week, or 95% of those people who lose weight on a diet regain it again? And I'm a real case study, having been Slimmer of the Year in 2010, lost 6 stone. But unfortunately, I put some of that back on. And is that to do with one's motivation and commitment? Maybe. Is it one's skill and capability in terms of understanding what's required? Well, you know, the right food, the right diet, the right nutrition, the right exercise. Is it the distraction of working in a sweet shop or going past the garage on long journeys all the time? Yes, perhaps. But I actually think it's to do with something else as well. It's to do with the concept of self-control and intentionality, which is about practicing something and doing it consciously. And there's a guy called, a psychologist called Roy Barmester, who undertook some studies really in terms of self-control. And the main out being of that was to think about self-control like being a muscle during resistance training. If that muscle exposed to continuous stress and the muscle becomes depleted of strength, we can't exert any more energy and it fails. And if we have to rely, you know, if you keep putting stress on it, it'll just become depleted of strength. So in metaphorical terms, if we have to rely on willpower to sustain new behavior, the overwhelming likelihood is that actually we're going to fail. But if we do know that self-control can operate like a muscle, then we also know that actually repeated exposure to stress followed by recovery may lead to some greater strength. You know, and we can see that in terms of if you go to the gym and you try and work it out and you do too much, you can't do any more, say on the weights, for example. But actually, if you go away for a few days and then go back, we can, you know, and actually you can probably start to lift even more. We've talked about in the past the need for the energy of renewal of the body early on, and we talked about, briefly touched on sort of the need for emotional, looking after emotional energy. And the other energy, not surprisingly, is the mind, and the importance of focusing the mind. And that's about our capacity to control the placement of our attention and focus. And the more control we actually manage to have over our attention, then we can start making some purposeful choices about where to put it and how to feel. So, for example, even on a golf course, you know, I could be out there and just think I'm going to hit it out in the fairway, and that fairway's hundreds of yards wide, and it's not much focus. And yet, when I'm with a tour player, they'll say, actually, I'm aiming at that leaf in the distance. And, oh, which leaf's that? It's on the tree over there. And what it does is it takes this wide focus and it brings it down to a much more narrow opportunity for them to see. And one of the things that we know is that a lot of professional people or high performers, let's call it that way, in whatever field, actually make purposeful choices about where to focus their attention and how long. And there's a great little study in terms of looking at this. Ericsson undertook, who's a researcher in performance, looked at a study examining the deliberate power of actually practice among violinists. And what he did was he took 30 young violinists from, I can't remember where, the Academy of Berlin, I think it was, and put them into 3 groups. One group were those people which they felt would be professional soloists and actually have a career of being solo artists. The other violinists were those who were good enough, still good, good enough to be in an actual orchestra. And then there were some who were in the music education part of the seminar, the academy. Sorry, lost my plot there. And they were really heading for careers as music teachers, and they'd all played violin since the age of 8. But what he did in the study was to ask people to keep a diary of all their activities, hour by hour, over the course of that entire week, and ask them to look at and rate how important was the activity they actually undertook in terms of helping to improve their performance on the violin. And secondly, how difficult was it, did they find it to do that? And how intrinsically enjoyable was it to do that, this practice element? Interesting enough, well, not surprising actually, the top 2 groups averaged like 24 hours a week practice compared to the future music teachers, which I don't think, is a real surprise. I guess it's no surprise, and actually that practice does really matter. But that wasn't the key insight from the research. The key insight from the research was actually the relationship between intense practice and intermittent rest. All of them agreed that practice alone had the biggest impact on performance. Most agreed that the practice was most difficult activity, and that in their lives actually, and the least enjoyable. And what else was interesting was that the top 2 groups who did 3 sessions a day, actually, but they didn't do it, they only did it for 90 minutes, mostly in the morning. I think that was because they were rested and least distracted. But the important thing is, in the 3 sessions that they did do in these top groups, between them, or in between the sessions, sorry, I should be clearer, they all took renewal. They all took breaks between each session. Whereas the lowest rated group, or the lowest performing group, didn't have any fixed schedule at all, no sense of specificity or intentionality, and would often practice in the afternoon, which seemed to suggest, it wasn't proven, but actually perhaps they were just procrastinating because they didn't really want to do it anyway, A, because it was bloody difficult, and B, it wasn't very enjoyable, although they needed to do it. And the other interesting fact on that in terms of performance was that all the violinists reported sleep as the second most important activity when it came to improving as a violinist. Interesting enough, the top violinists actually had some naps during the day. They had 1 hour, I think it was 1 hour more per sleep per night on average than the other groups as well. So what? But the key outcome is that in terms of high performers, and this related to violinists, but you could look at it in terms of tennis players or high performing anybody, somebody who's operating at their best self. They work more intensely than most of us do all the time, but also recover more deeply. And we know that solo practice undertaken with high concentration is actually really, really pretty exhausting. And for us, okay, so how do we go about doing that? Where do we focus our attention? And where do we focus our energy? And what does that look like? Would you prefer to spend a day in which you could progress on a range of small tasks, or one which could make substantial progress on one important project? I mean, the vast majority of people actually, funny enough, report breadth and quality over quantity. But actually, that isn't how we live our lives, really. It doesn't feel like that. We don't have the time to do things that we really like in breadth and to the quality in which we like it, because we're always having to do something else, always having to move on. We're always having to be, well, not always having to, we are sometimes interrupted. We don't have the space and time that we might like. And it seems like our lives are divided into smaller and smaller increments of focus. There's this story about Microsoft workers who've got 20 windows open, and they may look at them at sort of 10 or 15 seconds in front of each of them. So they've got lots of sort of breadth, but no depth really. And we do more things now than ever in terms of, what's the word I'm saying? We do more things more now than ever, but not necessarily focus on them now that we've lost our attention. So how do we get that back? So we're going to look at focus, and there's two dimensions in relation to this. There's the quality of attention, which is breakdown to how absorbed we are, how focused we are in terms of absorbed of that attention, and how distracted we are in terms of our attention. And the other dimension relates to the span of attention. So is it very narrow, or is it small focus down, or is it a very wide span? And that enables then to look at a number of things. So if we think about this one, where we're actually highly absorbed, but a really narrow focus, what do we think it feels like there? Absorbed with a narrow focus. So we've got a lot of attention, but it's focused in a specific area. And for that, it's sort of a tactical zone. And it's where a lot of us, where we operate best when we can get in that place, where we're not distracted, we're totally focused, but we've got our energy all aligned in one area. It creates some energy, we can be stimulated, we can be energetic, maybe externally, but also maybe in the task or the situation itself, but we can be operating at our best. Then we've got a situation whereby actually an email pops in or somebody knocks on the office, and we've been focusing really hard on the neuroendocrinology of Parkinson's disease in that moment or something like that, and somebody's knocked on the door and said, Rob, and actually what do? Do you react? And then you're distracted to that one little thing that's happened there and have a narrow focus? Or do you manage the situation and say, hold on a minute, actually I'll come and see you? Or do you allow yourself to be distracted and then you're gone, and trying to get back will be quite interesting because psychologically you will have moved out, and to get back in that performance zone can be quite difficult. So often there's lots of reactions going on, particularly at the minute with COVID, with people knocking on doors, and what can we do to get back into our performance zone? We've also got a situation where you can be absorbed, have a bit of the target market's a bit bigger, it's a bit of a bigger zone. It's not as focused on one particular task. You're still thinking about a particular project and then pretty engaged, but actually the extent to which there's some freedom to operate within the framework within that. It's a wider picture that enables you to have some thought and some process, but not so closed down that you can't think outside of the thing that you're thinking of. And then we've got a situation where, in terms of your attention, you can be really distracted and you can be really all over the place. And that could be for any number of reasons, really. It could be because actually you're so bored that you're totally distracted. There's nothing to focus on, as I mentioned earlier on, and you're just thinking of all sorts of things. It could be that because you're actually so overwhelmed that your mind is just so busy and distracted that you can't think of anything specifically, and it's thinking of so many different things at so many times. It's so busy you can't handle it. But the important thing, I think, for everybody is to consider actually the context in which we're facing the situation, the environment, the physical environment we face ourselves in, and the motivation of what we're doing, because that impacts us sometimes. But more importantly, in terms of these boxes, where do you spend most of your time? And at the minute, where do you spend most of your time? And we're not going to have time today necessarily to go into it, but I would like you to think about when you're in the performance zone, what's it feel like? And how do you find your performance? And what are the things that make you excited, enthusiastic, or energetic in that? And then how easily or how often recently have you been pulled back into this reactive zone? And to what extent do you allow it to manage you, or do you actually manage it? And then similarly, sometimes instead of just being, staying in this performance zone is really quite tough for some people. So for me, I can do it for perhaps an hour or a period of time. If you're a golfer and the golf pros would go out there and they go and practice on the range or whatever, and they could do it for a period of time, that's fine, as the violinist could. But then after a point, they may start to get bored, and then the quality starts to dissipate and get less. So they move away from it. And some people, a colleague Anna was talking to, she said, well, if she's got something that she's really absorbed in and it's really motivating, or it's exciting or interesting to her or stimulated, and a narrow focus, she can be with it for days without having to move away from it. So we are different, and it's differentiated in terms of who we are. So also, in terms of, if firstly, self-awareness is the extent, where do you spend most of your time? If you fall into any of these zones, what is it that creates that fall, or that tips you into it? And more importantly, and when you are in those places, how productive are you? There's no, I'm not judging anybody. I've been down in this distracted wide zone. I've been playing a computer game for hours because I haven't wanted to face the reality of the situation or whatever, or sometimes just to relax. But actually, staying in that isn't particularly productive. And how do you actually get back up is the key thing. How and what makes you shift. So that how or what sometimes is to do with our underlying personality. And we've got the brain here, pictorial version of the left and the right. And one of the things that we know is that we have different preferences. And again, there's no right or wrong or judgment on this, but people experience the world in different ways. And my wife, for example, is someone on the left, very left-hand brain dominated in terms of her experience. You know, what's real, what's practical, likes to, if she's going to do something, have a purpose for it and see some sense of utility, very organized and planned and structured, and be decisive and organized. And if she can't be, that starts to affect her or makes her feel uncomfortable or sometimes feel very stressed. So it's about being logical, rational, practical, organized, planned, controlled, and decisive, and the here and now. On the right-hand side, though, the brain, in terms of one's preference or perception, it's about having a sense of hunches and what could be. It could be about what are the future possibilities as opposed to what is here and now. And it's about sometimes learning new things or novelty rather than actually having utility or specific outcome. And it's sometimes the people who have that, who are focused on that preference, what drives them a lot of the times maybe spontaneity and flow and flexibility. And an example could be, let's just go that. So creative, adaptable, spontaneous, theoretical, open, flexible, and future-oriented. You know, and I can go to a film with my wife and we have seen the same film, but we experience it totally differently. In fact, the other day we were watching one of the artist programs on television. There was a painting done and Jane said, I can't stand that painting. It's awful. It's not logical to me. It doesn't even reflect what the heck the blooming artist is seeing. And I'm thinking, actually, I think it's brilliant because it's really created an opportunity for me to actually start thinking about it in a way about how mood it was and what the evocative spirit it was showing. Similarly, if we go on holiday, there are things like, you know, Jane would plan in advance everything out in the bedroom weeks in advance with all the suntan lotions and creams and everything. And actually, I don't do that. I just pack everything and go. So we can be very, very different. And that's one thing that's quite interesting. It's no right or no wrong, but one of the things is that we need to actually understand the difference between the capacities to allow us intentionally to foster those conditions. And the capacity to move flexibly between both sides is really important. Drawing on one or both is actually important in terms of the whole brain operating at its best. And under stress, sometimes we operate on the wrong side. So under stress, although I'm right side, I start to get very logical and detailed and organized and practical. And my wife, when she's under stress, instead of when she's normally rational and organized, starts to actually think about things in a catastrophic way, which actually doesn't have any reality to it. So we wanted to help you in terms of think, okay, what is one thing that we could do differently and really practically to actually help people move forward? How do we start to focus and consider what we specifically do to focus our attention more intentionally and purposefully so we can become our best selves? And at Work Happy, we like to do that, as I said. So in terms of the situation, can we change things? You know, there's the situation, there's your attitude, there's how you're feeling, what you're thinking and what you're doing. And at the moment, if I take my diet, in the past, I wasn't in lockdown, I'd be driving past a garage, I'd get some food, feel guilty, and then actually, I'll throw it out the window so I don't get caught, and I don't eat it. That was my self-control. But more recently, things are in lockdown, so the situation's changed, and my wife doesn't buy any rubbish like that and buys prawn and vinegar crisps, which I absolutely hate, all of that. So I can change that, or it has been changed. The situation's been changed. Similarly, in terms of you changing your attitude to something, you know, in terms of, am I going to accept being interrupted, or am I going to manage that and say, actually, I will talk to you, but I can't do it right now. So the extent to which you manage that, or if you're feeling actually that you're really down in a bad place at the minute, how do you get yourself up and change that in terms of when I'm performing really well, what does that look like? And the same in terms of thinking. You can change your thinking in terms of actually when I've really been at my best, I've done this, and actually I'm going to start thinking about that and doing that. And similarly, the behavior that you show. So in terms of focusing on doing something practical on the left, for those people that are either really strong left, but actually just for some reason at the minute aren't doing what they normally could do or would do, there's intention, but there's no specificity, then we suggest that you list out everything that's on your mind, that you prioritize that list. You know, that some things are urgent and important, some things are not urgent and not important, etc., etc. So if you have a list, put it down, then put it into those different areas and see which ones are important. Secondly, decide what you aren't going to do, because we all carry these things that actually we say we're going to do and we never do get round to doing them. And either they're not important or we're not committed or we don't want to. Let's just clear them off the desk. If they are urgent and important, then make sure that you do them. You need to block out time for each item that you've got. And you've got a planning time for breaks and distractions for tea like the violinist. And this isn't a time management piece, of course, but actually the intentionality and specificity will help those people, particularly with right brain, who don't have that to tap into. And the people who do have a left brain dominance, you may have all the intention at the minute, but for some reason, because of self-control of the world you live in, you're just missing it at the minute, and you need to create that opportunity. And secondly, you need to be realistic. Can you actually fit it all in? You know, we've got all these things to do, and the reality is when lockdown started, we talked about all the things we were going to do in the house and the garden and everything like that. I think we've done one thing or two ththings. So now we started to plan it in over a period of time and get much more focused. And it's creating an opportunity for us to do that. Similarly, on the right, actually, one thing I want to say there is in terms of mental health week and depression, there was a time when I had really bad depression, and I remember that actually I just didn't know how I could move forward. And one of the things, my uncle was professor of psychiatry at Barts, and he suggested to me that actually I write down some actual specific activities that I could do each day, whether it was just one thing. And that really helped me. And secondly, I had all these thoughts in my mind and it was just racing around. And he said, get out of bed and write them down. It was 3 o'clock in the morning. They'll be out your head at least. And that really, really helped me, although it was such a simple thing. So if your mind's busy, try and quieten it down. So for the people with the right brain dominance, it's about actually learning to quieten your mind. And quieten your mind could be meditation, the things that we hear and we see in terms of Tai Chi. And sometimes people sort of laugh at that. And actually people with a logical left brain sometimes think, I can't see the value or the purpose in that. What's the utility? But actually it helps quieten the mind, and it allows people just to create a space where their mind is less busy and they can actually recharge and renew. Plan that time to go for a walk or doodle or ruminate. Give yourself permission to do that. That actually the utility of, God, it's not delivering a goal or a specific something that as a task you're doing doesn't matter, because it's actually giving you time to renew. Remember, high performance isn't just about the intentionality and the focus. It's all about making sure that you actually take some time out. You have the practice, but then you take time out to renew. So if you've worked hard, there isn't much good in staying in office for hours and hours and just trying to think and work your way through it, because we start to become inefficient and it doesn't work. Actually give your time the opportunity to move away. Offices are starting to put things in people's rooms and in terms of games and that sort of stuff, and Google is saying, oh, you can have this time to bootleg on new products and ideas, which is great intention actually, but the organization itself hasn't really supported the people in that to give them the time, because they're so busy on the tasks they've got to do, they've still got to focus on them. So an intention's there, but actually the organizational support and the culture's not there. The other thing is to make sure you give your whole attention. One of the things that we know is if you are so focused on doing tasks and delivering things and your mind is so busy, you haven't got the opportunity to step back, step out and look in as to what's going on. And one of the things that we know about the right side in terms of preference is that that's where empathy lies. And if you're so busy doing, it's difficult to stand back, difficult to play the game and yet be on the sidelines, but we need to do it to get a different perspective. So if you're not doing it, you have to consciously do it in terms of your intentionality and your specificity. And you need to allow the opportunity to have some distractions at time as well. For those of you that feel it's not useful, I understand that, but give you the opportunity to do that and to create an opportunity for space. The interesting thing about this is actually when it comes to having a problem or solving a problem, both with the left and the right side of the brain, we actually use both all the time. So initially when we first got an insight, you're using the right side, that creative side. And then you think, oh, well, I need to gather some information or I need to do something. And then you start to look at some detail of some things that have happened before to help you with your ideas and give you some context and logic. And that's your left side. And then you probably get stuck for a bit. And then you try even harder to think about it and it doesn't get you anywhere and you get frustrated. And that's your left mode, trying to actually use your strength to get out, but it doesn't work. So then oh, you throw your hands up and walk away and think, I can't handle this, or throw it down the garden. And that's sort of the right-hand side mode, being playful, or just trying to let go of things so that you can start things up. And over time, the creativity starts to come back. So, you then manage to get back into the problem, work through it, and more creativity can often occur. But trying to think creatively in itself is sometimes an oxymoron, because sometimes isn't the space and the freedom to do that. So that's where we need to do it. And then at the end, there's this sense of, okay, well, let's test things out. So allow some distractions, give yourself some attention, give your attention to other people. If you don't do that, actually, it isn't that we're, and I'm guilty of this, it isn't sometimes that actually I am trying to ignore people. They may say something which I'm listening to them, and my wife gave an example. She told me something and I was listening to her and I was giving her attention, and then it sparked an idea in my head and I was off. It was like, oh, there's a bird. Oh, and then something else happened. And it was like, that was my positive energy, but overplayed, it became a weakness. So it's a strength overplayed became a weakness. And that weakness is actually disrespectful to the person that you're listening to. It makes them feel as if they're not worthy sometimes. I mean, I've had it with parents talking about children, and they're talking to the children, they're trying to help them out during the school period. And actually the kids are just at the window sort of pretending they're listening, and they are listening in terms of the content, but what they're not doing is giving you attention. And that makes you feel not very good at times. So if you are in front of somebody, try and just concentrate on giving them attention. Don't let the phone interrupt you. Don't let the ping of the email. If you're with a person, try and be, and the best leaders are those people that make you feel like you've got all the time in the world and they're just for you and nobody else, regardless of what's going on. What I'd like to do now is actually get you to think about, well, last time we actually finished with a wise old story from a Cherokee talking to his grandson. And today I'd like to put some of your learning or thoughts into action and learn to stand back, not to get absorbed, and use your observation skills to tap into the behavior of what you're about to see regarding focus and attention, together with the impact it's having on folks. And if you can do that, that would be really useful. So let's go.
Right, guys, thanks for joining us. Just keen to have a chat about where we are in the situation at the moment. I think you're both there. Olive, hi, thanks for joining us. Mabel, you are connected, but you need to start your video. Down at the bottom of the screen, it's a camera. It looks like a biscuit. If you just nudge it with your nose, you should. There we are. You don't have to be so close if you want to move back a bit. All right, thanks. Right, so basically an update as to where we are. I can see you both look worried, but the good news from head office is that neither of you is going to be furloughed, but we have to try and repay that loyalty with some of our own. I know that's supposed to be a strength of yours. So what we're looking for, what management are looking for, are ideas. Sorry, Mabel. This is one of the things that we have to address, the lack of focus at times, because well, there's the inappropriate stuff with Kevin the Doberman from accounts as well, but one thing at a time. So there are things that we have to try and improve on. Well, I'm uncomfortable with the chat as well. But maybe you switched off the camera again. Can you switch it back on? Switch the video? Right, there we are. Okay, the annual report. You've pretty much ruined the sofas. 913 squirrels chased, none caught, so not a good return. So again, things to... Sorry, Mabel, if you're going to do that, could you just switch off the video function again so we don't have to see it? Right, well, Mabel's away, Olive. Good news, you will be receiving a small bonus for slightly better behaviour. Okay, Mabel, we'll have a chat in a minute. I'm going to put you on mute so I can talk to Olive. Right, Olive, I've got a message from management, which I have to read out. You're a good dog. Yes, you are. Who's a good dog? You're a good dog. I'm glad it makes you happy. Okay, well, you just keep up the good work, and thanks for joining us. I'll see you on a walk. Right, Mabel, so if you could just take a bit of an example from Olive and follow her lead. Are you falling asleep while we're having this chat? This is all part of the problem that we've got to sort. She's gone.
So, okay, it's a humorous clip, potentially, for some. I mean, I found it humorous, but the message is there, really, in terms of not just animals, but in terms of, he's done it for a reason, but the ability to actually focus, the ability to pay attention, and the specificity of actually enabling that to happen gives us the opportunity to perform at our best and to operate at our best as a teams and as individuals. I guess that's it for the webinar mostly today. In terms of as I said, the webinars, we've been through 2 of them. The next one's going to be around finding your spirit and actually looking at that further in terms of your purpose and value and your underlying behaviours. We've really enjoyed having you along today. I hope that we finished a little bit early, so if there's anybody got any questions that they want to either ask for a chat or want some further information or like to talk to us even further, that's great. In terms of send us an email or let us know on the chat line. I'll be around for a little bit more, but I wish you a safe bank holiday weekend. Stay safe, stay healthy, stay vigilant. And in terms of work happy, we hope that you still take responsibility and accountability for your happiness at work, because life's too short to be unhappy. So wish you well, wish you safe, and look forward to speaking to you next time. Thanks. Bye for now.